So we finally made it to game week 38. Let's take a look at some of the best players to have one last roll of the dice with ahead of the final game week of the season. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to take a look at some of the final game week punts for game week 38 this season. And of course, it wouldn't be game week 38 if we weren't already going to be talking about Mo Salah from the off. And yes, he's kind of largely been irrelevant for a few game weeks now in FPL, but with one game week to go, a good home game against Wolves, and to be honest, not a whole lot for Liverpool to play for, you kind of get the feeling that they're just going to be unleashed in front of the Anfield crowd in the final game of the season. And Salah is going to be a player that almost all FPL managers are going to really struggle to get to. So if you're in a position that you can get to Mo Salah, maybe you've got 2 free transfers, or maybe you've kept the money in the bank to get back to him, then he could be an excellent differential. And don't let the ownership percentage on the screen now fool you. His ownership at around 100, 200, 300k is about 5% in game week 37. So he is going to be very differential, whether or not he does well in the match on Monday night. I'm recording just before the Aston Villa-Liverpool game, so if he goes off injured, I do apologise. I'll leave a note in the comments below if that is the case. But as long as he gets through that game unscathed, independent of whether he looks good or not against Aston Villa, that home game against Wolves is going to be really appealing. Wolves are obviously on the beach themselves now at the moment, and Mo Salah's data is incredible. Yes, he's had, by his standards, and these are very high standards by the way, a pretty mediocre season, but 18 goals, 11 assists, that's 29 attacking returns so far, and over 200 points yet again. This is a guy that scores points, and I really wouldn't put it past him to get a pretty big haul against Wolves, who have largely looked like a team playing with not really much to play for in the last few game weeks anyway. This is Klopp's final home game. Mo Salah most likely is sticking around for next season, but you never know. This could be his last game for Liverpool as well. I really back him. The data is absolutely incredible, and like I said, going to be a mega differential with explosive upside potential in game week 38. Most managers won't be able to get there because, let's face it, not many of us have a ton in the bank and not many of us have 2 free transfers at the moment. So most of us would need to take a hit to get to him. If you're in a position where you don't need a hit, or you've got the money in the bank to get there with just 1 free transfer, then I would highly advise having a look at Mo Salah as long as he doesn't go off injured against Aston Villa. Next up, I think a player that's going to be really popular amongst the content creators and the FPL community this week will be Michael Olise. He has been unbelievably good ever since coming back from injury. 10 goals, 5 assists in very limited minutes for Palace this season. And the data is that of a premium asset, 0.36 XG per 90. And matching that in the assists per 90 as well is fantastic value for money at 5.7 million. And under 2% ownership, he's an ultra differential. Now, the only asterisk against Olise is the fact that he's not got the easiest fixture in game week 38 against Aston Villa at home. But Aston Villa look like a team that are pretty tired at this point. They've played a lot of games this season. They seem like they're running out of energy, kind of crawling over the line to the end of the season now. Obviously, they've had a very good season. They're still a good team, so I don't want to overlook that. But Olise, especially paired with Eze, have been incredible for Palace in the most recent game weeks. And I think since Glasner came in, they've actually picked up the 3rd most points in the league behind only Arsenal and Man City. So this is a team very much finishing the season strongly. Olise has put himself in the shop window as well, and I imagine at home at Selhurst Park, he'll want to go out on a high, as will Eze, as will Mateta, both of which I would also recommend as punts this week. But I'm only going to pick one for this video, and the one that I would pick, and the one that I'm highly considering myself, possibly selling the likes of Anthony Gordon away at Brentford, would be Michael Olise, who's putting up ridiculous numbers. Eye test wise has been absolutely phenomenal pretty much all season when he's been fit. So I really like him as a 1 game week punt. And against Aston Villa, yes, on paper, not the easiest of fixtures. But as I've just discussed, I think that Crystal Palace are a team very much in form. Aston Villa are kind of crawling over the line a little bit in recent weeks. I do still really fancy it as a matchup. And Michael Elise will be a player that I imagine a lot of managers are going to be looking at as a 1-week punt this week. So I imagine our forward lines are largely taken care of for game week 38. I think most of us will have Haaland, Isak, and then another, but most likely Jackson, all three of which have good fixtures. So I'm not recommending that you have to ditch any of them in game week 38 here, but if you are after a differential striker, or maybe you don't have one of those three players in situ in your side anyway, and you're looking at a transfer in your forward line, especially if you're chasing, I would have a look at Chris Wood. His form on paper recently hasn't been great, but he has missed a lot of quite big opportunities recently, and I do get the feeling that he's not a million miles away from coming good. And Burnley, away from home, who are already relegated in the last game week of the season, I do really fancy a Nottingham Forest asset for game week 38 with upside potential. Chris Wood is 1 at 1.5% ownership, very differential. The XG per 90 is very good as well, 0.56. 12 goals this season isn't bad either. And until recently, until those last couple of game weeks I just mentioned, he did have the best conversion rate in the league. I think that's taken a little bit of a dive recently, but he's still getting the chances, and I still back him to get a decent haul away at Burnley. Now, the other player I'd probably have a look at, who has been very good recently, 3 goals in his last 2 games, is Callum Hudson-Odoi. If you wanted to look at a differential midfielder, again, very cheap, very differential, not the best data, it must be said, but he has looked good recently. So if you're looking for a Nottingham Forest asset, if you really want to target the fixture in game week 38, Chris Wood or Hudson-Odoi, both good. Out of the two, I would back the data and I'd back Chris Wood. Another team whose assets are going to be really popular in game week 38 as we look to pile onto a team that are still playing for the league at this point are Arsenal players. And 2 midfielders I want to recommend today, the first of which is Kai Havertz. 7.5 million still really isn't that expensive, and a lot of managers with 5 strong midfielders, especially on a bench boost in game week 37, will probably have a little bit of money saved up to make a move to one of the Arsenal midfielders. And Kai Havertz right now, the data's good. He's getting into good opportunities. He's made that number 9 position his own recently. Playing out of position as a striker at that value is going to be really good and decent upside as well. 174 points. He's actually had a really good season across the board. And to be honest, recently, he's maybe been even a little unlucky not to get more attacking returns than he has, despite the fact he has been in pretty good form and getting the numbers anyway. 8.2% ownership, he's still pretty differential, and he'll definitely be more differential than say the likes of Bukayo Saka. So if you're chasing, I'd definitely have a look at Kai Havertz. If you're trying to hold rank, I think Saka probably makes more sense, but it is worth noting that he is more expensive, and if you're trying to chase, his ownership is going to be a fair bit higher than Havertz. And it makes sense that it would be. He's got better data, he's on penalties, and he's been more reliable. So I wouldn't want to put anyone off of going with Saka, who I'd be very surprised. I know what he came off with an injury against Man United. I would be very surprised if he was injured for the Everton game. I'd be absolutely stunned if he didn't play that match. That being said, though, he's probably the sensible call. If you want to chase and you want to go for the upside, I would have a look at Kai Havertz. He's been playing very well recently. He's had a bit of a standout season, especially in the second half of the season since he got that number 9 role. And the data looks good on paper, but as I've said in a few videos recently, this data is probably a bit of a red herring because he's not been playing as that number 9 all season long. And this data is across the whole season. So for a large part of it, he was playing in that second 8 role on the left-hand side, and his data wasn't as good when he was playing there as it is now. So the data is probably not as good on paper as it has been recently in the position that he's now currently playing. I actually did buy him in game week 37. It's a long story. I'll go into it in my team selection later on in the week. But I really did like what I saw against Man United in what was a fairly muted performance overall from Arsenal. But Kai Havertz was a player that was making things happen in that game. And not just in that game, but in a lot of performances recently. He has been one of their star players. And I really like the look of him in game week 38 if you can get there. So I did mention that there are 2 Arsenal midfielders I would have a look at, and Bukayo Saka isn't the second one. Obviously, I've already talked about his merits. You know how good he is as a player, so I don't really need to discuss it too much today. But one player that has really caught my eye recently and is a mega differential in game week 38, if you were chasing, if you wanted to try and catch up in your mini leagues right now, Leandro Trossard could be the guy for you. At just 6.5 million, he's even cheaper than Havertz. But again, Arsenal have been playing the same starting 11 for 4 games in a row now. Trossard has been a part of that and has gotten 4 goals in his last 5 appearances for Arsenal. Of course, got the winner against Man United. And his data has been very, very impressive down that left wing as well. 0.48 XG per 90 for a midfielder is very, very encouraging. He's come in clutch recently at just 2.3% ownership as well. Extremely differential. And I think most managers are probably going to be looking at Havertz or Bukayo Saka and will probably largely ignore Trossard. And I don't really know why that's the case. He has been locked in. Yes, he gets subbed off a little bit early sometimes for Martinelli, but in the time he's on the pitch, he's still getting those attacking returns and he's looking really good on the eye as well. 12 goals this season. He's one of their key members in attack at the moment. And I really do back him to do well against Everton, who by all accounts should be on the beach themselves. And Arsenal are going to be very, very keen to make sure that they put Everton to the sword. City have been catching them on the goal difference total in recent weeks. And there's every chance in the world that in game week 38, it could come down to goal difference still. So Arsenal are going to want to score a fair few goals. Trossard has been a key member in attack for them recently. I really like Havertz, I like Saka, and I do really like Trossard as that differential option for Arsenal if you're really chasing and you want to do something a little bit different in the last game week of the season. And at the end of the day, FPL is a bit of fun. Maybe you haven't had the best season, maybe you have, and you just want to celebrate the last game week of the season with something a little bit different. Trossard could be that guy, and I really like the look of him recently. So let me know in the comments below what you think of that. So that wraps up my final watch list for the 23-24 FPL season. Hopefully you've enjoyed my content today and across the season. Of course, I've still got my team selection coming later this week, so it's not goodbye from me just yet. But if you've been watching my content, I just want to say a massive thank you for supporting me this season. It's been a really exciting and fun experience to dive into the world of content creation in FPL this year. And even though my rank hasn't been the best so far, I've really appreciated the journey. I've appreciated all your support. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm really excited to get going once again for the 24-25 season. So if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, then obviously you won't miss out on any future content ahead of next season. And I plan on seeing you later this week as we wrap up the season with my team selection video ahead of game week 38.